So then we are back with more understandings on the time of the second tabernacle services that we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu, we then understand, obviously, Leviticus the 23rd chapter regarding the spring feast, and also the autumn feast, and we are waiting for this special period coming 10 plus 8 years, very maximum, minus the discount of time found in Mitzchiyahu, the first recorder of the spring feast, chapter number 24. Then we should ask ourselves, what is going on then with the ancient trade routes of old? Let's study then during the time of Mesopotamia the very ancient trade routes, and those kinds of routes are returning. Let's understand why. They were very active during the time of the great kingdoms. They were also active during the time of the Messiah. And they are going to become even more active as the cities of the Messiah are returning. Prosperity is a byproduct of this event. Liking it or not, when the Messiah returns to his holy cities, then prosperity goes with it. So then, let's evaluate some of these areas because it's very important for us to understand the future of logistics, infrastructure, updating of ports, airports. Let's make sure we understand the importance of roads and then trains, ships of many kinds. As we then prepare ourselves for this new period of time, as it was explained before, Alibaba, the most important e-online trade, try to understand, we are speaking of trade. We are establishing then trade from ancient times and then in the modern times, where then Daniel the prophet in the 12th chapter explains at the end of time, and then knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. So then, as we understand, this system must become 100% active. Then many sections of the holy instructions regarding then the Torah and the old ways of trade, as you can find in Isaiah, for instance, the 23rd chapter known as Yeshayahu, you find then the freighters, you find then the merchants whose opinion or whose authority are very weighty. So then, because of these, when we read Yeshayahu the prophet or Daniel, we are then a step away from the third section of this new system. It was explained before, the Chinese system is coming very fastly. In a few days' time they went to New York Exchange and they were absolutely gloriously done. And then, as far as we can understand, the price of each share was very high and the company is absolutely doing its very best. Only lacks the third step, investment via the same system and a linkage with the Bank of China. So each user of the computer can invest directly on their products. So then, because of these, we read then the holy instructions and we establish a link with Daniel and also Yirmiyahu the prophet, the 23rd chapter. And then high knowledge explaining then the circuit going around the world, and then nations becoming part of it. But doesn't stop there. There was an article related with the Arab nations regarding fuel. It is imperative for the Arab nations making deals with the BRICS, from where the new system is going to become worldwide. There are many kinds of linkages, and the very most important is linking up each computer with China in some form, of some way, having a centralized computerized system where then each nation, they can convert their money and then being linked up with China instantly and directly, so they can invest precisely, and then receiving each person per month as they invest on their products. That's the third step. Extremely important, because then the understanding of Daniel then becomes completed, and at the end knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. When this topic then completes, then Daniel the 12th chapter regarding the high knowledge then completes. Because of these, what should we expect from the future trade? Obviously, the Arab nations must make a deal with the freighters. It is extremely important, because as the second transition then in the future must come through, and then the relationship as the Arab nations providing then the freighters fuel directly from them makes then the transition much faster. So let's understand the point. The Arab nations, they send crude or its derivatives to the other nations, understandably. But when the Arab nations, they do trade directly with the freighters, then the second transition becomes very much near. And these should be considered also done amongst the nations of the BRICS. So then, thus far, the understanding is very fragmented. There are pieces in China, pieces in the Northern Kingdom, pieces in the Southern Kingdom, and many other countries, until China completes its circuitry of systems of investments. Then the linkages are going to become very fast. Because of the system and the event of the computer, and then monetary systems being involved as each computer becomes a central bank, then it is important having these linkages, as USD was the standard for Bitcoin, for instance, and then many other of these monetary systems obviously being linked with China. So then, reading from this perspective, where are then the proofs where we find then the 23rd chapter of Yirmiyahu the prophet? How do we know that these freighters are going to have the authority? It's very simple. Yirmiyahu the prophet explains these sections as then the merchants are then the chief traders, whose presence then are very weighty in the earth. We are no longer speaking of governments, but let's place the understanding in a very right position. Governments are going to become secondary, but they are going to be there. They have to lean up. because there won't be much to do. However, there shall be then a higher trust of governments and freighters because of the advent of taxation via labeling. In other words, this system is so precise of the freighters, it is so important that the government gives them the authority to do their work. As long as taxes are being charged, they are on their way. Now, governments must lean up because the situation is changing so rapidly where governments, they can't interfere with trade anymore. They can't manipulate the market for the purposes of staying on top. They won't be able to do these anymore. That's why they must retrieve, lean up, and then trust the freighters shall to do their work. But then linking up the product, price, and taxation instantly, deducted from each package, so then the government receives its share. These, however, shall produce lots of troubles, positive troubles. For instance, the updating of the ports, airports, and then many areas of landing of aircrafts, and many more storage places, so then they can make sure these packages are safe for delivery. Not only these, but there are also routes in the oceans. Let's then evaluate, for instance, via maris, as we understand from Yirmiyahu the prophet. There was an article very important a few days ago in Asian Review explaining then China with very important plans for the Indian Ocean. It is extremely important being on top of these because as we read, so many times China is linking many of these countries with itself, not only at sea but at land. These should give us comfort because as we can understand, the more China links these nations, the more precise this system becomes. And then governments, they won't be able to steal anymore. So then, read from Yirmiyahu the prophet, the 23rd chapter, so then we can establish what's coming in the near future. We understand the 11th chapter of Daniel, verses 7 and 8, we're expecting then the Soviet Union making a deal with Egypt. As then Egypt becomes harmonized and linked with China, first linked with the Northern Kingdom for the purposes of arms, bringing peace and security to the area. From then on, then Northern Africa, and then linking up with China. The understanding is very simple, but as long as it is done as per instructions, then harmony is obtained very fast. There won't be very many hurdles, so then these nations are then going over each other and trying to make sure the situation then takes place. No, it takes place by itself, as long as we understand these factors. So then, based from these understandings, then we link with Daniel. Daniel the prophet. Why then Daniel spent the entire chapter 10 searching for the importance of China? main question is, did Daniel know regarding China? No, he did not. He was obviously searching for this answer because he was praying and fasting for more than 20 days so he would understand who was the leader of the base of the statue. He knew the nations would be strong and nations would be weak. But in any kind of a system of gathering of nations, always there is some sort of organizations amongst them and somebody taking the lead. As Daniel was the leader supreme during his time of service. As he was praying, he did understand the kingdom of the East was then the leader of the restoration period, Gentile level. And then comes the 11th chapter where then East, North and South, they have a relationship, so then we understand the iron places of the base of the statue. Then from reading it, we understand then obviously then Egypt making a deal with Northern Kingdom regarding arms, and then from Egypt then Northern Africa, then a link with China. By then, more than likely, the third step then shall be included. At this point, very recently, we know that the system was integrated in US. Now comes the virtualization of the monetary system of China, and becoming easier then for each person have the Chinese yen stored in their computers, and then responsibly doing trade via online. Later on, we're going to study more of this, because as we understand, China is always moving and making more trade and then linking up other nations, but then at least we have, in quote, an anchor, so we can understand what to expect from the nations. Mostly at this point is infrastructure projects. So then, please stay tuned, much more coming up.